This right here is Ashley Williams. This is Miranda Lawson. That over there, that's Liara Tassoni. Her way at the end, that's Edie, an AI. Now, I know you've most likely seen these characters on a different site than this one. And in any of those moments where you saw these characters, you're probably wishing to yourself, man, I wish I had a little something to benefit me right now. And that is why I want to give you my fantastic sponsor, Adam and Eve. Yup. Truthfully, I don't really need to cover much about Adam and Eve. They're a pretty famous company with a pretty famous amount of products. And if you don't know about them, well, it's a damn good thing I'm mentioning them. I would highly recommend you check out Adam and Eve and get a nice, solid discount on many of their products using the link and code down here in the description. Honestly, it's kind of cool. I could be sponsored by a company like this. Feels pretty good, man. So check them out. I am positive there will be something for you. Hello everyone, my name is Bricky, currently running from the law for selling large amounts of unsolicited foot pictures, and Mass Effect. Oh boy, Mass Effect is my favorite game of all time. Not particularly the first one, but like the trilogy as a whole. I kind of cheat if you ask me what's your favorite game, Bricky. I say the Mass Effect trilogy because they all have their highs and lows. The first game has an amazing story, great villain, and wonderful universe, but the gameplay and just playing it in general sucks major ass. The second game's gameplay is a little bit better, but you're mainly there for all the awesome characters and their new stories, even though the main story is kind of mediocre. It's a bit of like a side grade or like a side quest in the overarching way of Mass Effect. And the third game does a great job at selling the insane scale of the battle you're currently in, as well as having the best combat and, well, you know the downsides to that game. But it's a bit hard to put into words why Mass Effect succeeds where so many others fail, and I think it really does come down to charm. The game doesn't have the best voice acting, and sometimes the story really does falter. The animations can be pretty poor, the facial animations especially, but there are lots of times where your weapons or your armor might clip through each other, characters use the exact same poses all the time. But there's just this level of charm, the way you craft a universe, the way that you have these characters that have all these special stories and how they react and move with your character being Commander Shepard, and just there's a certain weird way to describe it where the universe just feels so lived in, so specific, so well crafted. It's like a fairy tale. It's like when you watch Mad Max Fury Road and you have this flamethrower guitar looking son of a bitch in a world where they're running short on gasoline. Like, it's totally silly, but who cares? It really is a sci-fi epic that has some of the best characters in video games in general, and one of the few doomsday plots that I actually felt. So often you play a game where it's the end of the world, the end of the universe, but in reality, it never felt that way. Mass Effect really is that game that sold this scale of, oh god, how the hell am I gonna beat this? Moving on though to Mass Effect 3, which is still a pretty good game with an ending that no one can let go, and I don't blame them for it. But really what we're talking about here is not any of the stuff I just mentioned, but rather the multiplayer. This, coming out in 2012, really was the harbinger of all the things wrong with the gaming industry today. BioWare was forced to make the biggest game with the most branching paths and all the craziest stuff in less time than the other two games. Ridiculous amounts of crunch time, a tacked on multiplayer that was added in as an afterthought, loot boxes that also are tied to the progression of said multiplayer and therefore give you an in-game benefit. This infamous ending screen. And while with Mass Effect 3's multiplayer, which is still very obviously an afterthought, considering it's the only game that has it, still completely rocks. And so why, against all odds, was this multiplayer so fucking good?
Report to the ship as soon as possible. We're bang, okay?
Me3's multiplayer is a horde wave defense style game mode. There is no PvP of any kind. It is strictly cooperative. 4 players load into a specific map against a specific enemy, and they fight through 10 waves of that enemy, with the 11th wave being an extraction. Once you are done, you gain XP, you gain credits, and then you go right back into it again. To start with, you had 6 classes total. You had the Adept, the soldier, the engineer, the sentinel, the infiltrator, and the vanguard. All of these utilize some form of physical damage, biotics, or tech attacks. The adept is a biotic specialist. Now, what are biotics? Well, imagine like the Force, but balanced and way less bullshit. The adept doesn't heal a sandworm, it sends it into the stratosphere. Biotics manipulate the environment using like a dark energy, dark mass kind of style to it. They can pick things up, they can throw things, they can hit stuff with excessive force, they can turn people into zero gravity and have them fly away, they can create barriers and shields to block stuff. They can rip apart armor and flesh at like a molecular level. Biotics are very powerful. That being said, they are either genetically just naturally there for you, like the Asari, or they have to be installed using an implant. And generally, the more powerful your biotics, the more strain it takes on your body. And so naturally, if you want to do something crazy like constantly hold a barrier up, it's going to drain on you and your ability to do so. It's going to drain on you physically. Now, an adept is a high level biotic. They are full biotic. They run around generally rather squishy, but they can just blast people with powers upon powers upon powers. They can create singularities that fling people around, pull people out of the ground, smash into armor with tons of damage. They can create barriers and AoE lightning fields. Biotic is it's a magician. It's a space wizard, all right? And they're super cool. Soldiers are as they sound. They are physical specialists. A soldier is big, generally kind of tanky, and they have a big damn gun. And all their stuff is related to that. They have frag grenades or say arc grenades. All their weapons have abilities that can therefore boost them, increase accuracy, increase damage. They have missile launchers and sometimes special melee. Soldiers are tried and true beefy boys. Go out there, take a gun, murder shit. The engineer is pure tech. Now, everyone in Mass Effect has this thing called an Omni tool, and this Omni tool is basically just a steroided out Apple Watch. In addition to being able to hack things, search the internet, act as a telephone, basically anything a computer can do, it can also have lots of offensive capabilities like overloading shields with electricity, firing out cryo or incendiary bolts, hacking synthetics, or creating decoys. It creates all these kinds of weird tech attacks. Not quite like a magician, but like a tech magician. Imagine it's like Gandalf, but he's Steve Jobs, not dead. Sentinels are a combo of biotic and tech, and normally they use this as a way to generally make themselves pretty tanky. Soldiers are beefy boys, but Sentinels can generally be the biggest tanks because they have lots of barriers as well as different kinds of tech armor to keep them safe. They employ a little bit of both. They have some biotics to throw around, they also have some tech to throw around, but they generally are pretty tanky in how they operate. I think that's mainly because of their combination of the two. Infiltrators are as they sound. They are cloak specialists. They go invisible, use sniper rifles. They're also half combat, half tech. So they can overload shields and create decoys and all, but their main thing is go invisible and then fire sniper rifles or shotguns at close range. Which at the end you have vanguards, which are basically for your forward smash Unga Bunga Ike mains. The vanguard utilizes combat and biotics, but they're generally very close range specialists. They literally have an ability called biotic charge, where they take themselves and they have a giant biotic force around them and turn themselves into a huge battering ram. It's awesome. You have 3 separate abilities to choose from. And these 3 abilities generally are some kind of main ability and 2 auxiliary abilities. For infiltrators, they pretty much all have tactical cloak. It's a pretty standard ability for them. Vanguards have biotic charge, sentinels have tech armor, the soldiers have some kind of like adrenaline boost or some way to make themselves fire faster or more accurate. Adepts are actually kind of all over the place, if I'm being honest, and same thing with engineers. So you pick your class and your character based on these kinds of abilities, and then what do you do next? Well, it's weapons and power ability. So each of these powers can be upgraded in certain branching paths as you get more points. However, even at max rank, you can't spend it all to make them all maxed out, so you gotta pick and choose still. As for weapons, you get 2 weapons, and weapons are based on a weight system. The more powerful the weapon, the heavier the weapon is. The heavier the weapons, the slower your ability cooldowns are. So if you're Mr. Soldier Man who just throws grenades and presses a button once in a while, you take the biggest, chonkiest, heaviest guns you can. But if you're, say, an adept, a biotic specialist, you might only want a pistol or an SMG because then your abilities will just recharge extremely fast. These weapons are classified into 5 different types: assault rifles, snipers, pistols, shotguns, and SMGs, and they all have differing weights, and they all can have 2 separate attachments to them, which can be things like increased damage, magazine size, melee damage, etc, etc. Next up, you choose a map. Now, the game started off with 6 different kinds of maps. They're all called fire-based something or another, and you can either choose one if you'd like, or you can have the game choose a random one for you, and that will give you actually a little bit of extra experience. Next up, you choose an enemy. At launch, you had Cerberus, the Reapers, and the Geth. You pick one of those, or you pick random if you want some more experience, seeing a little bit of a theme here. And finally, you pick your difficulty, which you probably should put more thought into this time around. Either bronze, silver, or gold at launch.
Why do you do this?
There's another theme going on. Once you've picked all of that, you load in with all of your friends, and then you start the game. What do you gotta do? Simple. Kill everybody. At wave 1 and 2, it's just some light enemies, nothing too crazy. You can work through it pretty easily. When wave 3 comes, you actually have a task though. Now these tasks are on wave 3, 6, and 10. And what these tasks do is they make you do some kind of action, generally forcing you out of whatever position you're currently in. This can be run to a console and stay near it for a while for AoE hacking, run around and hack 4 separate little comm beacons or whatever those things are, or particularly kill a certain enemy. In fact, there are more than this, but those came out later, and we'll talk about those later. Complete all of these and you get credits. Complete them even faster and you get more credits. Now, these objectives don't get harder with waves. However, the game itself does, which naturally makes them more difficult. As the waves go on, more and more enemies will start showing up, and harder enemies too. The Cerberus might start off with just their basic trooper and maybe a centurion here and there, but as time goes on, you're gonna find combat engineers that place down turrets, and then Atlas mechs that really start to cause problems, and then phantoms, which really start to cause problems. After completing round 10, you end up going to round 11, which is an extraction mode. It is endless enemies of all types. The hardest and the strongest enemies will be sent at you never-endingly, and you've got 2 minutes to survive. One part of the map will have an extraction point, little blue circle. You better be in that damn extraction point when that last second hits. If you are just a millimeter outside of it on that last second, sucks, you're not extracting, but you better be in that spot. When you are, you've extracted, and then the game is over. You're awarded your credits, you've awarded your XP, and now it's time to play another one. But what are credits used for? Well, credits are used for the worst part of the game, which is the loot box part. However, the loot boxes, they don't feel so terrible. I mean, they are terrible, but it feels not as bad when it's not a PvP game, but anyway, it's not important. You have different kinds of packs. The small pack gives you things like consumables, extra shields, extra assault rifle damage, things that you place onto the game that are one-time uses before the game actually starts. Then as you go up, you can have different things like item unlocks and also new character unlocks, and they have rarities going from common, uncommon, rare, and ultra rare. This will allow you to get the new characters and new weapons, and all these new characters and weapons actually start at a level. They start at level 1. Characters don't really care about this. You can get them higher up in level to unlock different kinds of customization for them, which is still pretty lacking. The customization isn't particularly good, but for weapons, it's far more important. The weapon, let's say the Matic assault rifle, also known as the Chad gun, starts off at level 1, and the more you unlock it and the more times you get it, it'll go all the way up to level 10. And this is completely in line with damage, accuracy, etc. The higher up it is, the better the gun is. And as you can see, it's like the game has this weird shallowness and exceptional amount of depth at the exact same time. The gameplay itself isn't really the greatest thing ever. It's serviceable, the actual gunplay in its own right. And the maps are kind of just limited. You only had 6 to start off with, and they were all in the main game too, so they're not really anything new and special. The loot box part was certainly pretty bad, but in a weird way, it didn't feel terrible, maybe because it was a PvE style game, but also because that was your main source of progression, and there was quite a bit to unlock, considering that every weapon had to be unlocked up to 10 times, and you had so many different weapons and characters to choose from. While it was, yes, kind of like a infatuated grind, because of course you could buy these loot boxes with real money, which obviously is terrible, But that kind of was the progression for the game in a weird way, and it just felt a little bit not as bad when you were playing it. It could be rose-tinted goggles, but I think I spent maybe $20 on loot boxes in the entirety of my game time, and yet I unlocked everything in the game just through playing it. But, you know, like I said, harbinger of things to come. There are a lot of problems with Mass Effect 3. But even, like, with all of this, it still scratched this itch that I really needed scratched. I am a huge Mass Effect fanboy, and as a huge Mass Effect fanboy at the time as well, being able to play as other races was just insane to me. I can play as a Solarian, I can play as a Quarian, I can play as a Krogan, and they all have their own different abilities and special powers. I can play as a Turian. He can't roll or anything because he's all tall and shit, but he's got some extra shields. I can play as a Drell, who has these weird ninja flip rolls that are really badass to look at. There was even special animations. Krogan had a headbutt attack and also like a charging up smash instead of a regular empowered melee ability. As I like muled over this script, I had such a hard time figuring out why I particularly love this game so much. Why did I keep coming back over and over again, besides just being a Mass Effect fanboy? And I was thinking, well, the gameplay is fine, but it's nothing like overly crazy. The map variety is pretty low. It's not really fantastic. The class variety is fine, but it's not like overwhelming or anything. And while DLC was a huge part of it, but we'll talk about that a little bit later, I realized that there was really only one option left.
And I say, Zangief, you are bad guy. But this does not mean you're bad guy.
Enemy design is like an unsung art in video games. Being able to craft an enemy, a villain, that you will have to fight over and over and over again, and the player will have to just fly in there head first, and to constantly be enjoyable and interesting is generally very difficult. But when it succeeds hard. I remember looking at the first Last of Us game and seeing the enemies in that and being just absolutely floored with how they acted, because they acted so much different than regular enemies. They acted like people quite often, between the animations and the way they kind of moved around, skirt around the battlefield, and how they talked and act. Like, sure, they're still blind as a bat because they have to be for any game that has stealth. But overall, I remember thinking to myself, God, the ability for this AI to react to me is so goddamn good. So when I looked over Mass Effect's enemy list, that's when I realized the enemies are insanely good. And not only are they insanely good, but they all do something. They all have a purpose. They're visually different, they're varied, they can be quite difficult at times, and they all have a secondary ability. Like, look, Cerberus, assault troopers can execute you and throw grenades. Centurions deploy smoke. Combat engineers deploy turrets and heal Atlas mechs. Nemesis immediately cracks shields and skirt around when met head on. The Guardian has a riot shield to deflect bullets and powers and can be pulled off through use of counterplay. The Phantom is the source of all of my rage, but they can turn invisible, insta-kill the player, create a biotic bubble to stop attacks. The Atlas mech has a high-powered gun from range, but also a missile launcher with damage over time, AoE stun, and can deploy smoke. Oh, and that was just one of the enemies. Reapers, the husks can tie you up in a melee animation. Cannibals can execute your friends and eat their dead allies to gain themselves armor. Oh, and throw grenades. Marauders create armor for both husks and cannibals. Ravagers are mobile artillery platforms that, when you shoot their belly, little mini swarm dudes come out to get you, and they also poison you. Brutes are giant hulking tanks that actually have charge moves, and they can swing at you upon death and insta-kill you. That's pretty rare. And finally, Banshees are just nightmare fuel, and they can teleport, create biotic barriers, have a shitload of health. They can do damage over time, homing attacks. They can insta-kill you as well, and they can do AoE biotic smashes. Explosions, whatever. Oh, but I'm not done yet. Geth troopers can execute down enemies, and I think throw grenades, but that might be wrong. Hunters go invisible and get behind you and can cause a stun lock. Pyros have insane close range damage and can also explode when they die. Missile launchers have homing missiles that keep you stuck in cover and delete your shields. And the Geth Prime has a giant triple shot weapon that can not only stun you, but can also summon a turret to shoot at you from behind and a drone to zap you to stun you, to pull you out of cover so he can shoot you normally. And we did not even talk about the Collector's DLC, which we will talk about later, that has all different kinds of normal and possessed versions of enemies that also have double functions. And if that wasn't enough. Each type of enemy has their own kind of health. There's health, shields, armor, and barriers. Health is normal and is generally affected by most of your weird messing around with the people powers like biotics and tech. Armor is great at stopping light arms fire and stuff, but can be shredded by different kinds of tech and biotic attacks, and also high-powered weapons like sniper rifles. Shields are really good at stopping small arms fire and biotics, but just melt to tech attacks, and the biotic barrier is the exact opposite. They melt to biotics, however, they're really good at blocking different kinds of tech and small arms fire once again. Oh, and did I mention combos? Did you know that your weapons can combo? A lot of your attacks and abilities have primers and detonators. If you throw out, let's say, a biotic pull on somebody, you've primed them for a detonation that you can slam them with a warp or a reave to create one of the most amazing sound effects of all time. Turn your bass up. And this isn't just biotics. This is also cryo, fire, and tech. So when you mix this all together, you get this amazing enemy variety that's an abundance of fun to fight. You might have heard that I talked a lot about insta-kills in this game. There is a certain thing where some enemies, if they're really close to you, can kind of lock you in this sync kill grab and then insta-kill you and you can't be revived. Now, this is a source of frustration for some players, but it's less the problem with the actual insta-kill. It's more of a problem with the netcoding, because sometimes the network might be bad or the host that you're playing with might not have a good connection, so you'll be grabbed from years away and pulled into the insta-kill. That's more the problem. The actual sync kill itself is, well, sometimes quite aggravating, does build into the concept of the game. If a phantom is barreling towards me, I'm gonna get the fuck out of there. If I'm hearing a banshee teleport towards me, I'm out. I'm gone. In fact, every enemy has its purpose. You have your basic rank and file troops that are just meant there to shoot you and cause problems. But then you have enemies like the Geth missile launcher and the Prime, or the Atlas mech and the Cerberus turret, or perhaps the Ravagers. And their whole purpose is to force you into cover because they just do such high damage. But then, when you have these suppression enemies, you also have the ones that force you out of cover. The Banshees, the Brutes, the Phantoms, the Guardians, the Geth Bombers, and Pyros. You have multiple kinds of enemies that do multiple things, so you have to think tactically when you play. You're gonna regret not shooting that Ravager that's about to instantly murder you when a Banshee is teleporting on your ass right now. This variety of enemies makes them not only so fun to fight, but constantly refreshing every single time you do fight them. I know what all these enemies do, but I'm still in this interesting dance where I think to myself, I can't be out and about right now because those long-range artillery are gonna kill me. But I gotta leave anyway because Phantom is on my ass right now and I gotta bail. And so many things also have an impressive counterplay to them as well. Phantoms in particular are really susceptible to things like stasis, and stasis will keep them stuck there so I can get up and kill them really, really quickly and not have to deal with a lot of their problems. Guardians, you can use pull to yank their shields off of, or if you have a high power, high armor penetration weapon, just shoot through their shields. Combat engineers are vulnerable when they're pulling up turrets and it can explode and kill both of them, which is very handy. And hell, Geth are synthetic. You can hack them, make them fight each other. And it's really nice too because this scales with the difficulty setting that you choose. Bronze and to an extent silver are generally pretty easy. You might have a few problems on silver if you're trying to level something up and you don't have enough people or something like that. But normally you can generally breeze through it. Once you get to gold though, shit gets hard. Phantoms and Banshees are terrifying. Phantoms do insane damage, and once they get close to you, I mean, that you're a goner at that point. Banshees, while they're more of like a annoyance and a way to get you moving, they have so much HP, and you can't let them get anywhere near you or else you face the insta-kill. But then during this period of time, Ravagers, Scions, Atlas mechs, Geth Primes, they're gonna two-shot you. And it can get really damn hard. And so you've created not only an enemy that's both fun to fight, but also challenging to fight. And making a challenge fun instead of tedious is like expert game design. But truly, and I do mean truly, what made this game stand out so well in this mime was what came after. So we talked about the gameplay loop. We talked about the pretty bad monetization system. We talked about the enemies and the classes and all that kind of stuff. But let's talk specifically about the DLC for this game and the amazing support it got. First things first, the game had weekly patches. Like weekly patches. Not just bug fixes. updates, balance changes, character adjustments, and improvements. Every Tuesday, there was another patch. Weekly. I have no idea how they did this with the console certification. I have no idea. But they did it. A week. Do I have to explain this? Why a weekly patch for a tacked on multiplayer was in a game like this? Weekly! I think I feel like I'm on crazy pills right now. Like I'm looking at all these giant AAA games and things like that, and all of their live services and stuff, and they can barely muster a patch like every month. Weekly! And some of these patch notes were extensive. I found a whole list of all the different weapon patches and changes, and it is extensive how much work they did on this multiplayer. On the multiplayer of Mass Effect 3. But that wasn't even the big part. It was the DLC. It was all completely free. You had to get the new characters and weapons in said loot boxes. You know, it would come out and then you would have to, you know, still earn the things, but still free. This wasn't just characters or weapons. This was a new difficulty mode, a new enemy, new objectives. You had gear slots, titles, and challenges. So the first DLC was called Resurgence. Probably the worst one, but that's because they were just getting their footing. And that one has 2 fire bases, one of them called Condor, and one of them called Hydra. That was the name. One of them was on a dam, one of them was on Palaven's moon, the Turian homeworld. It had 6 new characters, and Asari Justicar, the big old bubble. It lets you play as a Batarian for the first time, and they had all these fancy abilities like an explosive blade gauntlet, a weird damage over time net, and the super long tracking melee attack. You could play as a Geth for the first time with an AoE melee and generally pretty high shields, low HP, and some kind of ludicrous damage at times. And you also got a Krogan Vanguard. Yes, you had a Krogan that could biotically charge. 10 out of 10. It also came with an automatic explosive assault rifle, a harpoon gun, and a Geth SMG, which are all kind of fun things, and some new consumables and things like that for the pre-mission, but this was just the first DLC. The second DLC was called Rebellion, and it added Firebase Jade and Firebase... Goddess. Called Goddess. Those were on the Solarian and the Asari homeworlds, and these added a whole new slew of players as well. You gotta play as Vorcha for the first time, which had these crazy melee attacks and also a special flamethrower. You got male Quarians to allow for special targeted debuffs, and also ex-Cerberus troopers with biotic whips, which were probably the most overpowered things at the time, but goddamn did they look cool. You had a Prothean particle rifle, the explosive Chrysae sniper rifle, you had the Rieger carbine, what might be one of the most destructively busted shotguns in the game, and the Cerberus Harrier, what might be one of the most destructively busted assault rifles in the game. A new objective was also added to the 3, 6, and 10 wave modes, which was grab like a box or some kind of gear thing and take it to a position to add a little bit more spice to the normal gameplay loop. They also added a gear slot, and the gear slot was a non-consumable, consistent buff you could use over and over again, like flat assault rifle damage, increased shields, some kind of just like little slot socket that you could use and constantly reuse depending on your character. Now the Earth DLC is when things really started picking up. You had Firebase Vancouver, Rio, and London. Out of the 6 characters, you had these new N7 style operatives. AoE biotic damage and actual teleportation. Huge chonky murder machines of rockets, shoulder mounted rockets, and guns. Grenade spam out the ass, giant fuck off shield and snap freeze, and oh boy, snap freeze. Literal teleports behind you assassin, and giant fuck off biotic katana. Jesus Christ, BioWare, you're out of control. You had 11 more gear upgrades from the prior DLC. You had another mission on the 3, 6, 10 waves, which was escorting a drone around the place, which actually was not as bad as it sounds, kind of fun. More weapon mods, a new pistol, giant assault rifle, and shotgun, and platinum difficulty. Because life wasn't hard enough for you already. Platinum difficulty. Harder than gold, except you get to fight all 3 factions at the same time. Have fun. Next up after that was Retaliation, which added a whole new enemy, the Collectors, which we hadn't seen since Mass Effect 2, and this wasn't a rehash. The Collectors were completely updated. All of their abilities, all of their models is a brand new enemy force you could fight. Completely original design. Well, you know, it's like still the collectors, but like a totally new enemy style. They added the Cerberus Dragoon as well as the Geth Bomber to add a little bit more spice to those two factions and give them a little bit of a unit that can push you out of cover. They added 16 new characters you could play as. Tons of variety. Every kind of just different wacky builds you can put into different areas and really kind of cause some crazy concepts. They all went around there. And you could also play as the Volus. The Volus. Need I say? I think I do. The Volus. It started off with 4 characters, mainly the Volus, and then they added a new character in all of those weekly patches for 12 weeks. So every time it was Tuesday, new character, give them a shot. You got 3 new collector guns, you got new ammo types, you got new gear, you got hazard versions of the original 6 maps, which made them harder and give you more XP, but also allow you to have these kind of weird problems like snowstorms or perhaps acid rain. Finally, they added challenges and banner cards. If you completed certain challenges that were listed, not only did you get more XP, but you get this really fun artwork piece of a banner card that you can show on your profile as well, which added a lot to the game. It was actually really cool to see. And lastly, there was the Reckoning DLC. Probably the smallest DLC. No new maps in this particular one. However, they added 6 new characters, about I think 7 new weapons, a bunch more gear mods, some more weapon mods as well. But the main thing were the characters, because they were really different. A reawakened collector that has returned to its normal self and can do crazy biotic stuff. You had a Geth Juggernaut, which was a gigantic fuck-off Geth that could not be insta-killed, which turned out to be really broken. The Talon Mercenary, which was an extraordinarily high damage but glass cannon frame with like omni bows and stuff. You had my personal favorite character, which was the Edibot, the Alliance Infiltration Unit, which had Snap Freeze, oh boy, Snap Freeze, an ability to get up after death, and an insane shotgun cloak damage ability. The Krogan Warlord, which was fun. Big ass Krogan with a hammer, and he whaps things until you realize he can be insta-killed, so you try to whap a phantom and then he kills you. And then a female Turian that has teleporting poison attacks and damage over time. Really wacky stuff. And the most flavorful of them all. And all of this was free. Yeah, you had to get the loot boxes to get new characters and stuff. And yeah, that was kind of a pain in the ass. But I got everything from it. There isn't a single character or a single weapon I don't have. And yeah, I played it a lot, but even so. And then weirdly enough, this is one of the better aspects of this. The higher the difficulty, the more credits you got. The game actively rewarded you for challenging yourself. On bronze, you would get only maybe 15,000 credits, give or take, and a regular crate, the lowest one, costs 5,000. It's generally not worth getting. But then it goes to 20,000, 60,000, and then 99,999,000. Because the higher the crate, the better stuff you might get, and the more stuff you get. But when you were rolling through all these different kinds of crates and looking at all the different items you can get from them, the better you play, the more crates you'd get. So if you were good and you had a good group of friends and you actively tried to really learn the game and properly play it, you got credits out the ass, and so you would be earning things way faster. Nowadays, it's all about game time. It's all about how long you play. But this time, it was not about how long, it was about how good. And I miss that. I myself, I only beat Platinum once, and that was on stream a few weeks ago. Like, just the one time, because Platinum was too hard for me. I loved the game, and I can do some golds pretty well, but Platinum, that was really damn hard. And that's good. It should be. But playing well rewards you in an EA game? Hey, I'll take it.
Oh, Christ! What is that? Fuck!
Now, this doesn't say the game didn't have its fair share of jank. The game still had plenty of bugs. There was a big old missile launcher bug where you could use your insta-kill missile launcher consumable 1,000,000 times, which I think might still be in the game. You might be able to do it properly. I don't really know. I thought it was patched out, but it could still be there. Enemies that died, especially Geth Primes, would leave like a hitbox that you couldn't walk through after they had died. Therefore, it was like there's a big invisible wall in your way. Quite often, there's the sync kill problem where you would be dragged from super far away with these extendo Mr. Fantastic looking motherfucking arms. Often, enemies would be launched into the stratosphere by certain biotic abilities or get caught on ledges and therefore be really hard to kill at times. Hitboxes might not accurately line up, also a problem, but even so, oh god, and the lag, the attributed Mass Effect 3 multiplayer lag. Whenever a person joined your game, the game lagged. it stuttered pretty hard, which was hilarious because every time my game started lagging, I was extremely excited because that means I had reinforcements. As I told you, Mass Effect 3 is the only game where lag makes me excited. It's that damn good. But really, all of these issues feel like non-issues because it almost kind of built the game around them. You know, if you think of something like Smash Melee, for instance, all of these unintended problems and issues have actually kind of defined the way the game is played now. And Mass Effect was the same deal. All these bugs, all these glitches kind of ended up creating this particular style of game. You worked around them, you worked with them. They weren't particular roadblocks, but more just slow signs. It's almost like the jank becomes part of the experience. The jank is moved into the game, and even with all of that, there's still so much charm that keeps this game fresh and fun even 8 years later. Yeah, it's been 8 years. And speaking of feeling old, let's take a trip down memory lane for some of my favorite experiences and things in the game. Tactical Cloak Edie bot with the N7 Crusader. That range. The Turian Ghost with the Cerberus Harrier for making gold the easiest thing of all time. Geth Juggernaut with multiple melee buffs. Legion, give me the suck. The Volus Vanguard. The literal biotic charging bowling ball of doom. The N7 Destroyer with the Typhoon Assault Rifle for the literal definition of suppressing fire. The N7 Hurricane SMG for when an 810 just isn't enough. The N7 Paladin Sentinel for giving us snap freeze, which is so gross. Krogan Warlord because bonk. Biotic Explosions for the best sound ever. Let's hear it again. Firebase Rio's box. Firebase Rio's box. Firebase Glacier for speedrunning. The Hazard version of Firebase Ghost and its beautiful water effects that still hold up to today. Firebase London. I'm just kidding. Fuck London. N7 Shadow for literally teleports behind you before it was cool. The Black Widow sniper rifle in general. The M7 Saber, my favorite gun in the game. The amazing sound effect of headshots in this game. Banshees for still being terrifying 8 years later. Pink Volus. The Vorcha's insane grab melee. And finally, the best of the best. The special N7 challenge that they added in one of the DLCs that you can only get if you completed every single other challenge in the entire game that I just finished and finally got just for this video. And I wear this title with nothing but pride. In a way, Mass Effect 3 really was the harbinger for all the problems with the video game industry today. Everything from lack of budget, way less time than they deserve, insane amounts of crunch, loot boxes that affect the gameplay, and so on. Even with that though, the third game's multiplayer has persevered, and I still can get games on Xbox right now. There are still many people playing it, and some of them are even on comms, which is crazy to me. Those of you who were in charge of it should feel absolutely proud, and those of you who continue working at the DLC and kept the game fresh should be even prouder. I honestly would love to speak to an ex-BioWare employee that worked on this multiplayer so I can just pick their brain about this stuff, because it is unfathomable to me that it ended up being this good with every odd stacked against them. Thank you for watching this review. Thank you to all of my patrons that are currently flying up on screen as well. I appreciate you all very, very much. It is kind to have you supporting me and keeping my mind a bit at ease during all this time. And for those of you who are supporting during Corona and everything, you know, look after yourself first, all right? Like, do that first, but even if you're still doing it, I do really, really appreciate it. I only have one question today, which is, hey Bricky, what parts of your day-to-day have changed since getting Pebble? What things are harder to do because of that? For those of you who don't know, Pebble is my puppy. I have a little corgi puppy. We got him at like 12 weeks? 10 weeks. He's super small, and corgis are certainly a stubborn breed. I figured that one out pretty quickly, but I just rehab him, and you know, he's getting big and everything, and They say that getting a dog is like having a small child, and I have not had a child, but I can imagine why they'd say that. He is an absolute pain. He shits all over the carpet and all over everything, and I have to constantly clean it up and make sure it looks nice and good because I am renting this place and I do not want problems. Training a dog is hard, but at the end of the day, he's the greatest, cutest thing ever, and I can never imagine like him not being here anymore. And he's only been here for like a few weeks, so he's the best. But my day involves a lot more of training, moving him around, making sure he's doing okay, keeping his bowl fed, all that kind of stuff, and of course playing with him because he's a puppy and he needs to get his energy out. Okay, thank you so much for watching. It was a pleasure having you all here. And I don't really know what's going to be next up. I'm thinking maybe like a Legends of Runeterra or a Hades review, but it's always up in the air. So we'll figure it out. Hope to see you soon. And if you want to cop any Bricky merchandise, check out the Bricky merch store down in the description, brickymerch.com. Though it might be orchid8.com because we're doing a change soon. But yeah. All right. Bye-bye.